So welcome everyone, and this is the second in our series of Evening with events, and this evening we're joined by Nick Starr and Mafamwi Neville, and I'll introduce them both very shortly. Just a small bit of housekeeping to take you through, and that's to let you know that this event is being recorded and we'll make the video available to you later this week. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers to you. We have with us Nick Starr, who is a client of BKL's and a very good friend of the firm. And Nick was Executive Director of the National Theatre for, well, between 2002 and 2014, alongside Nicholas Hytner, affectionately known as the Two Nicks, with whom he's founded the London Theatre Company and is now CEO. Both he and Nicholas are credited with expanding the audience and the reach of the National Theatre several-fold by taking productions to the West End, to Broadway, and on tour, and also with NT Live. Nick's flagship venue is a 900-seater theatre called the Bridge Theatre, and that opened in 2017. He currently chairs the Yard Theatre in Hackney Wick, whose mission is community participation and artistic innovation. He's chaired the boards of Battersea Arts Centre and the Bush Theatre, and has served as a non-executive director of the Society of London Theatre and Nesta, which is formerly the National Endowment for Science, Technology and Arts. On top of all of that, he's received a special Olivier Award in 2014 and Tony Awards in 2012 and 2015. And was made a CBE in 2014. We've also got with us Mafamwi Neville, who is a partner at BKL and heads up our property and construction sector. As well as sitting on our executive committee, she's a leading figure in our drive to strengthen our inclusive culture. Mafamwi's also won the Women in Finance's Accountancy Leader of the Year Award in 2017, and was also a judge at the UK Business Awards in 2019 and 2020. So the format for today's session is that we'll hear from Nick and Muv, who will take us, which will take us to about 20 to 7. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll read out as many as I can on your behalf at the end. If you wish to remain anonymous, then of course you can do so. So without further ado, Muv, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Nick, for having us, for letting us host an evening with you this evening. It's brilliant.
A real pleasure. Thank you.
So, you know, Nick, we've worked together for a little while now since you started at the Bridge, and I've noticed in the time that we've worked together how well you bring together business and the arts. And I was just thinking, gosh, I wonder how it was that you got into theatre and the arts in the first place.
I was one of those people who was really keen on theatre at school and at college, and I was always trying to figure my way of getting in, and the profession was one of those, it probably still is like this, where to get a job, you had to have already had a job. Yep. And it wasn't the equity card thing, it's just, you had to do anything you could to demonstrate your commitment. So I fell into teaching at the Oxford College of Further Education, and I volunteered at a little community, left-wing community theatre in Stepney Green, East 1, called the Half Moon. And I just said, I'll do anything. I've got a vacation, so I'll just do anything. So I found myself working in publicity for them. And that was my crucial experience. And then from there, I kind of worked my way through publicity jobs and eventually got to work at the National Theatre in the press department. And at that point, I thought, this is a terrible rut. So I went to talk to the guy who was the executive director at the National Theatre, who I'll always be so grateful to, because he just took the meeting without knowing what it was about. And I just said, and he said, what kind of thing have you got in mind? I named the job I wanted, and he said, wait 6 months, and it could become free. And that was a job which was, it was a planning job, which brought together all the kind of the logistics, the artistic, the production, the actors, the stage management. It was a logistic job at the National Theatre, and that got me the kind of experience I needed to understand the theatre in its totality and in the round. And I've found that it's an enormously appealing thing to do, to try and understand as much of the detail you can, and then also have the overview. And I've tried to live by that throughout my career. And that's a very enjoyable thing to do, because the theatre is a very heterogeneous bunch of people. You know, there are people, if you're a producing theatre, there's pretty much everything that you do. You make, it's a manufacturing process. It's obviously it's a retail business as well. So, and particularly at somewhere like the National Theatre, you're coming across a vast heterogeneous workforce. Not as diverse as it should be, but it contains lots of different people. And I think that's one of the things that I found most pleasurable about working in the theatre for several decades.
Good grief. So tell me a bit more about what you did to rejuvenate the National Theatre, because I found a quote in some of the research I was doing that said that what you wanted to do was change the notion amongst the arts community that there was something undignified about talking about money.
Yes.
That's now that sounds like a tall order, actually. So tell me what you did when you got to the National, when you decided to make the changes that you wanted to make there.
That I think is absolutely at the nub of it, because when I went back to the National Theatre with Nick to run it with Nick Hytner, I obviously knew the culture really well, but I found what had happened was a kind of disengagement between art decisions and money decisions. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the theatre is not alone in needing to keep those two things going alongside each other. And it's pretty much a mantra, and this is not my coinage, that an art decision is a money decision and a money decision is an art decision. And sometimes in the extremely flexible, ambiguous vocabulary where people are called producers, and if you ask what is the core definition of the producer that you need to be in the position to make a decision, it is the person who can make an art decision and a money decision. I found that what had happened at the National was, for completely understandable reasons, a sort of certain kind of privacy and secrecy had set in, and it was thought to be undignified to the extent that, to talk about money, to the extent that at the regular senior management team meeting, there was no report of the box office.
Good grief. Okay.
And I don't really know why. And when I arrived, I overlapped, because I arrived some months before Nick, because my predecessor had left, and it was quite a nice kind of tessellated process. And when I insisted that the person heading up marketing should give a sales report every week, it was clear that that was thought to be a rather undignified thing to ask her to do. So we just sort of set about by a series of kind of behaviours, just by getting, well, it is about behaviours really, just trying to inculcate the idea that money is not sitting off over there. It doesn't belong to the finance department, and that all these decisions are interlinked decisions. And I guess slowly we managed to re-inculcate the idea that these things are open, that they're open for discussion.
Yeah, and that's a huge culture change process, I suppose, because it's all about changing behaviours and thought processes and ways of doing things that have been done that way for such a really long time. So what were the barriers that you found along the way that you had to overcome?
I think the main problem for the National Theatre, and this is an issue which any big institution faces on a pretty regular basis, is that however passionate one is about the need for the institution, and however committed you are to the idea that if you ever once let an institution of that size, complexity, and difficult genesis go, it probably is impossible to replace it, to reinvent it. And particularly so for producing theatre that's got workshops in-house. It's got so many craft skills being brought together. So I think one of the things that one has to do because that then leads to a certain amount of scale, because it has to have that amount of complexity, it can become inward. And I think there is the job that has to be done on a kind of regular basis is to reconceive what the mission of one of those institutions is, completely consistent with the reasons for its foundation in the modern moment. And if you're made of concrete and you're sitting there on the South Bank inhabiting a building, I think it's rather wonderful. You know, I mean, in my time there, it was moving between one of the most loathed buildings into one of the most loved buildings, which I think is interesting. I think finding ways of showing that you're not an inert, heavy organization, that you can be light in your feet. And it's mostly, I think, about inviting people in. I mean, we did eventually do a big renovation of the building, which sought literally to make it more literally porous. But before we'd got there, we did things like light the fly towers up, just to make it more outgoing, more bold, more contemporary, more engaging. And I think probably the single best thing we did early on was to say, right, okay, in the Olivier for 6 months, 2/3 of the ticket, sorry, the Olivier being the biggest theatre in the National, seating 1,160 people, which had been struggling to fill all those seats. What if we said 2/3 of those seats for 6 months of the year will be £10? And then we found a sponsor in the form of Lloyd Dorfman and Travelex. And Lloyd's been very important into our lives, and he's now one of the principal backers of London Theatre Company, but we didn't know him then. And he came, and it was very helpful that Travelex £10 season alliterated. And it sent a message that we want you. And it said that the actors won't get paid less, but it will be a liver experience if they're performing to a full house. So it was a price proposition in the sense that it was resetting. Theatre tickets have a habit of outpacing RPI by several times. So every now and then you have to kind of find a moment to reset them back so that they are affordable. And you really want people to feel that it's not a special event to go to the theatre. And that loosens up the choice of repertoire. So you don't have to put slam dunk plays. You don't have to have star casting. You don't have to have all that sort of thing. Getting the sense that it's in the kind of thing that you might do. I don't know what this play is about, but, you know, hey, it looks rather interesting, and the ticket is £10. So I think that sent a very, very powerful message, and it definitely had a halo effect on the attendances of the theatre and its popularity and its kind of engagement. And then we tried to do everything we could over the following years to sort of follow through on that proposition.
Yeah, I like the idea of inviting people in. The Travelex absolutely does that. And I think also I was thinking about NT Live as well, which is another big thing that's happened on your watch at the National Theatre. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, what happened there, what it took to set up NT Live?
For some years, people were saying, surely there must be a way of satisfactorily capturing theatre in digital means and then broadcasting it or capturing it in some ways. And there were 3 or 4 companies who were knocking on our door. And there was a very clear, successful example called MetLife. The Metropolitan Opera in New York had remarkable creative and financial success, popular success, by filming, by capturing operas live and sending them out into cinemas live. And this now feels like, you know, what took you so long? It's obvious, blah, blah, blah. At the time, the major hurdles to overcome were not the logistic, financial, or technical. They were hearts and minds. Actors, understandably, wary of having performances that were geared to reach the back of the house, then captured by something here. It helped, for instance, that camera technology had really improved so that you didn't have to boost the lighting levels. It was great to have an audience in the house so that you actually got some feedback.
Yeah.
It had recently been the case, and we're talking 2009, it was recently the case that it was routine for cinemas to have satellites on their roofs. So there was a kind of, the adoption of digital delivery of movies had already happened. So we came along at the right moment. I think we had a wonderful relationship with a very, very nice person who still works for Equity, the Actors and Stage Management Union. And she clearly didn't believe it. I remember at one point she said, yeah, I think it might be attended by 2 people and a dog. We didn't let dogs into the theatre.
I was going to say, who lets dogs into cinemas?
It was just coming to an arrangement with the actors that could allay the fears. Writers were worried that if the thing was broadcast, then they wouldn't get the movie deal. So we needed to, actually a non-profit, a mission-driven non-profit that was kind of financially canny, and we gave ourselves 1 year to get into profitability. We were the right people to do it, because we said the danger is that this whole space will be tainted for audiences, actors, writers, everyone, if somebody comes in and does it badly. So we simply have to do it as well as we possibly can. So the first one we did was directed by Nick. It was a production of Racine's Phèdre, and Helen Mirren was in the lead part. So leading from the front, typical of Nick, and also having a star actor really got us off to a good start. And from there, we did everything we could to find out how big the market might be. No one knew whether event cinema, going to see theatre in your local cinema, was going to be a thing. Yeah. I find it really interesting because it's quite a subversive, in a way, unpicking of the economics of independent film distribution. Yeah. Not in an aggressive way, just there are so many things about it that you think, oh yeah, it's great. The major problem for getting the word out is you can't put a poster on every street corner or in every local newspaper, not that you would anymore, but building a group of people who you could advertise to, and you could say, next month we're doing this, and then try and test the demand. So you start bringing in other people's work, asking commercial producers whether they'd like to join in, or other subsidized companies. So that plus the touring we did and the commercial stuff we did got our audience, I think, 1 year up to about 4 million people.
Good grief. And so I take it you became profitable within the year, as you'd hoped.
We did become profitable. I mean, it is profitable, you know, we generated the surplus, but and we didn't have to hand the money back to the seed funders who put it in. But yeah, it was a stretch target, but we managed it.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm just thinking about the shows that you put on while at the National Theatre, The Curious Incident of the Dog and Warhorse. And the interesting thing about those is that they're not it's not a big star-studded productions, but just interesting stories. Tell me a bit about how you chose what to put on, what not to put on in your time at the theatre. And we'll go into the Bridge in a second as well, because I'm obviously excited to talk about the Bridge.
There are so many lessons you can learn from other people who've come before you. And one of the great things that Cameron Mackintosh used to say was, you want the show to be the star, because if the star is the star, particularly in the theatre where they're balancing a portfolio career between screen and, you know, film, television, etc., and now obviously streamers. If you sell it on the star and you can't replace the star, then you can be profitable, you can be successful from a here to here, but it will never extend. Or there's always that worrying moment when you replace the star and the next person isn't quite the box office appeal. Yeah. So you're always really looking for something which contains some kind of distinctiveness, which becomes, when it's extended and transferred and all the rest of it, if it does. So Warhorse was the puppets, really. I mean, they were remarkable. Tom Morris and I, who's an associate at the National, went off to see the Handspring Company in Cape Town. He knew them already. We went to see a show which featured the most beautiful giraffes. And he said, what do you reckon? They'd be quite good, wouldn't they? They would. It took about 3 years of development to get it there. And the National Theatre benefits from, and this is the real answer to your question, it has a way of, it has an R&D department. It has a separate building as a department of the National Theatre. Separateness is, in all respects, except this one, not a good idea. You want to keep everyone under the same roof if you possibly can. But the R&D department, which needs to be able to do things, most of which will not see the light of day, an important risk mitigator. So they play, but but you give it the time so you can go through a kind of pipeline of development. And one of the early things we did was to invest quite heavily in the building of the National Theatre Studio. I mean, the 1950s building of it. So that's the answer, really. You have a number of things in the pipeline. The National, of course, has a big remit. So you're doing classics and you're doing Shakespeare and you're doing and so on. So in amongst there's room for something which has taken several years to develop. I think the key thing really is, and I suspect this is a pretty familiar, with you don't look at something directly and say, I can tell that's going to be a hit, because if it looks like the thing that was a hit, then this one won't be quite the same hit. There is no concept really in the theatre yet of the kind of the franchise. Yeah. It's a thought though, but generally speaking, distinctiveness, originality is what makes something a really big long runner. But the National Theatre's job is not to premeditate commercial success. It's to create the ethos and the culture and the investment in which these things will just arise. In the commercial sphere, as I now am, that's the same principle, but of course you don't have the same resource for the pipeline. So you are trying to make some decisions about what goes into the pipeline.
Yeah. So on that subject, tell me about the move to the bridge, and what is it that you wanted to build? What was the dream for you and Nick there?
I guess I should start with, well, why leave the National Theatre? And the answer to that is not because we got bored or fell out of love with it, but just because you can't hang on to a job like that. You just got to move on and make room for other people. And I persuaded Nick on occasions where he was saying, you know, I really think I should do 10. I thought, well, you know, you don't have to go at 10 years, you know. I was partly self-interested because there is a tradition that the executive director who runs it with the director, the artistic director, sort of graciously moves on and puts themselves out of a job. Knowing that, I wanted a long time to think about what I wanted to do next. Mm-hmm. And we had, pretty early on with Alan Bennett's play History Boys, had decided that we would be good custodians of our successful work when it moved into the West End. The pattern before that had been to hand it over to third-party producers, right, who would give you small royalty. So it was kind of a bit of a no-brainer, really. Yeah. So we'd done that, and I had close-up observation of the economics of the sort of heritage theatres in the West End, and I began to think that there might be another way of doing it, not as a direct challenger brand, but as an additional brand, and as an additional thing, and maybe not in the West End where, you know, property is very constrained. I just thought, well, you know, there has been a very clear, pre-COVID, very, very clear 2 decades of consistent audience growth by 25% since about 2002. So there was room for another theatre or more than one theatre. And I thought, well, if you stepped right back from it and you had a blank bit of paper, what would you do? And the answers, if you know, could we have enough loos, please?
Thank you.
Could the customer service be better? Could there be more space? Could the legroom be better? You know, could you set your standards at the level of a good restaurant or a good hotel? Is there any fundamental reason why a theatre can't do this if you were able to move in with sort of modern levels of comfort and technology. And then on the artistic side, what we've found, and I think this is going to be important for our future, is that the relationship between the audience and the performer, particularly where you want to try out different relationships in terms of different formats, led us to talking to our great friends Howard Tompkins, the Sterling Prize winning architects, who have been absolutely the secret of any. I mean, I've done about 12 projects with them over the past 20 years. And they said it was absolutely the right time for them to consider what the perfect relationship might be between an audience member and the stage, wherever the stage. And that was the kind of key to it. So they had begun that process. And Steve Tompkins did tap me on the shoulder and say, Nick, I know you're coming up with opportunities to build these theatres, but we can't every time go into a feasibility study. So why don't I and his longtime associate Roger, why don't we do a sort of study of what we think might be? And then when you found the building, we'll look. And almost immediately, we found a building at One Tower Bridge between City Hall, and it was a Section 106. It was a planning game. Yeah. And Berkeley Homes had struggled to find anyone to take over the cultural use of it, a deep, pre-excavated basement, and they were on the cusp of persuading Southwark Council that there wasn't a cultural use for it, and therefore they could turn it into something else. And probably very annoyingly for them, we came along and said we could make a theatre. So there was a lot of luck there, really. But the sort of mission was, what could you do if you had a blank bit of paper, you know? And the obvious answers are make it more enjoyable and have another look at the economic model. And once you take those kind of essential cost-based things away, you obviously want to prioritize personal contact with audience in the form of, you know, principally email, and data is the big thing. Data is I think data in the West End of the commercial theatre is the biggest single wasted resource.
Yeah. And the thing with the bridge is its flexibility as well, how versatile it is as a space. So I'm thinking about the immersive productions that you guys have put on, which are unbelievable.
Thank you.
And just to create the space that enables so much is very exciting.
And what I particularly love about that immersive format, which perhaps I should just explain what that consists of. It's just making a flat floor throughout the theatre. And I mentioned Howard Tompkins, but I also need to mention a brilliant entertainment engineering company called Tait, T-A-I-T, who do all sorts of amazing things around the world, and permanent installations and touring rock gigs and things like that. And we approached them with the idea, what if you could make a theatre, the perfect theatre, what would you make it of? How can we do this? And how can we do it so we could replicate it in success, or, you know, you could sell more of them? And they did that. And they also did an adaptation of a product that they use for putting up staging and seating in massive touring music gigs. And that was used to form the stage and the floor of our theatre. So it's a flat floor with seating all the way around. And that's got 650 people in it, the seating. It's quite close in. And the floor is capable of taking, including elevators that pop out of the floor. Quite cheap technology, just scissor lifts.
Really? Good grief.
Yeah,
okay. It's amazing.
And what's lovely about it is that those 400 people, they're on their feet and they're moving around, but they're very close to the action. So rather than the 400 worst seats being at the top of the theatre, the 400 best seats are there closest to the actors. And that sense of joy, which comes, the electricity that comes from you sitting there, leaning into the action, thinking, I might be down there. I'm kind of glad I've got a seat, but I'm really loving everyone's engagement. And we're trying to find the opportunity, both in London and New York, to build another version of exactly that.
Wow.
Now feels like a good time to go and knock on the door of landlords and councils.
Absolutely. So just thinking about the last 12 months and what it's meant for the sector, the arts sector as a whole, how's the bridge done? How have you managed? I mean, we've had a few meetings during the period, and you've remained very enthusiastic and chipper, and always full of ideas of things to do, places to go with the business. So tell me what it took for you to get the bridge and the London Theatre Company through the last 12 months.
We're a small team, and we're temperamentally quite aligned in that it always feels better to kind of come up with a solution than kind of bemoan our fate, because that's not only unattractive, but it's not a good plan. I mean, and it was, talking of plans, it's probably an American president. There's a kind of famous quote, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something about plans are worthless, but planning is essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we used the furlough. Thank you very much, UK government, Rishi Sunak. We used the furlough. Our investors extended a loan. We only took another 300,000 to get through on the cash flow. We cut all our salaries to 20% of what they had been in some cases. So we came down to the same level to just have solidarity. We hunkered down for a bit, and then we made plans to reopen. And as soon as we could, we reopened the very end of August, and we ran through September and October with a kind of rep of talking heads and other work. Mm-hmm. And then we just got into November, and that 3-week period happened, and then we just got open again for Christmas Carol with some Russell Beale, and then closed down after 10 days. Yeah. And I don't know why, it just felt important to sort of, there were quite a few people in our industry, quite prominent names, who just took that opportunity to complain. I don't know what they were complaining at. I mean, the government didn't have the email address for the pandemic, so I don't know what. Anyway, so that's how we got through that. And then in September we applied for a Cultural Recovery Fund loan, and then it took quite a long time for the legals to go through, but at the end of February that came through. Yeah. So
remember the emails from the team coming, "We got it! It's in the bank! It is in the bank!" I did a little cheer for you from my desk, I'll be honest.
Thank you. Nick had been asked by the BBC if he could make a new version of the Alan Bennett Talking Heads things, and he went and chose various directors, and we said, come on, let's be the production company for this. So we managed to make a little bit of money like that, and that was
a project with the BBC, wasn't it?
It was the BBC. It was BBC One, yeah.
Yeah.
They were brilliant about it. They were really brilliant about it.
And then you made the charitable donation at the end of the NHS.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, the cast and crew took the furlough wage. They took £2,500 flat fee, and that left £1 million between that and what the BBC could pay for it, and that went to NHS combined charities. Yeah, no, that was very good karma. It was really good. There was kind of energy. We were doing stuff. Nick was doing stuff. We were making plans for the future.
What do you think the thing that you learnt, the number one lesson or the number one thing that you took from the past 12 months, do you think?
I think it's probably temperamental, and this is going to sound so pious, but it always comes down to temperament and shared culture, doesn't it? I think it always comes. We're a small team. We're a very small team. Mm-hmm. So I think it comes down to that. I got very, very anxious that we were going to get in the position where we were going to have to not lay off all the people we call hosts, a vast number of people who who do the ushering and look after the audience and serve behind the bar and so on. And I think I got really worried that we were going to come into a contradiction between not being able to get the funding from our investors when the furlough ran out.
Yeah.
So there was do you remember when it was tailing off at the end of August and we made a decision to keep it going and pay that, but we knew the crunch point was going to come. So what was so good about getting open was immediately we had employment.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I was also thinking about the way that the arts can be used to create a capsule, a time capsule almost of a moment in time. And I was thinking about when you reopened the bridge, how you reopened with Beat the Devil, which is, I mean, I went there for a bit of escapism, didn't quite get it because it was a gritty thing about COVID. But how do you make the balance between political, non-political, escapism, moment in time, telling the truth about a situation? It's an interesting thing to me.
When you're putting together a season like that, it's really pragmatic. You want something that something to hang a press release on. And we'd heard David Hare on the Today programme talk about his early experience of getting COVID, and just went to David and said, presumably you'll be doing a theatre monologue about this. No, I really want to. So that was a very easy commission. And he immediately said, I'm going to write it for Rafe Fiennes. So Rafe Fiennes,
remarkable.
You've got to kind of anchor then, you've got to hang something on it. And then Nick was pretty sure that we'd persuade most of the actors in the talking heads for BBC One to come back in this kind of revolving repertory. And then we went out looking for work that was diverse, that expressed other voices. Mm-hmm. Black Lives Matter, of course, had happened. And of the various things that have happened, it was impossible to ignore that at the same time, nor would we want to. So in a way, those decisions made themselves. But we were looking, our principle was diversity plus some things which could feel like it might be the anchor. And it's really lovely to have in the theatre a very passionate, committed playwright with a fresh off the press piece. Yes, it's depressing, I know, but you know, there wasn't we're now looking for comedies. It's very, we can now take a more kind of interview. But yeah, it was fairly clear how to do that one.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So what's next for you in the bridge? What have you got on the horizon?
Well, we just so step 4 is the target date for step 4 is the 21st of June, and we're going to rehearsal on the 10th of May for a new play by Nina Raine, which is a long time commission. We commissioned her, it was one of our original commissions back in would have been 2015 or 16. So sometimes things take a long time. She's a brilliant playwright, and she chose to write a play about Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach.
Okay.
And she always had in her mind that she would write it for the actor Simon Russell Beale, who is himself a distinguished musician. So we decided to do that as our reopener. We had cancelled a number of things. We had a brilliant production we didn't quite get to announce that I hope we'll be able to do next year. A kind of chamber Macbeth with Adrian Lester and Leah Williams, and a cast of, in all, about 7, a kind of psychological take on Macbeth, which was a casualty, unfortunately, of the extended lockdown and so on. So we're going to do that. We put it on sale. We announced it 10 days ago, and it's really popular. We're taking the precaution of selling 428 seats so that we can maintain social distancing right through the run until the 11th of September. And then as soon as we're given the nod that we can have more in there, we will be able to. I said earlier...
How are sales looking?
Yeah, really enthusiastic.
Yay.
Yeah, really enthusiastic. Thank you. And then we're following that with a play we've also announced. A brilliant new play. It'll be the European premiere of the Pulitzer Prize play. It's called White Noise. Susan Laurie Parks had its premiere at the Public Theatre in New York at the beginning of last year. And we're going to do a new production directed by Polly Findlay that we're just casting at the moment. And then for Christmas, just before Christmas, we're the long postponed production of Philip Pullman's The Book of Dust, which is the follow-up trilogy to his Dark Materials.
Yeah.
And the first one in that is called La Belle Sauvage. And we've had that waiting to go for some time. So fingers crossed we'll be able to do that for Christmas. Then we're in the process of planning next year at the Bridge.
Yeah. And tell me about King's Cross as well, quickly, before we break off for questions, because that was a theatre that you were that was an agreement to build a theatre that you were signed up to, and you've had to change plans at the last minute for some alternatives. So to tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, back in 2017, we started lobbying for our next theatre, having not yet opened the Bridge, but these things take time. And we got traction with Argent, who have put together that amazing regeneration of the railway lands at King's Cross.
Cold drops.
Widely familiar. And we've got a they have built the shell of our theatre to our designs in a building which has gone up. It's going to house the Facebook offices on Lewis Cubitt Square, and the plan had been we would open a theatre and start installing it when it gets practical completion and handed it over to us this summer. We're not going to do that because for a number of reasons. We're going to pivot for a temporary period instead to do a project which is like an immersive art gallery that we've been in fact working on with our partners 59 Productions for the past 2.5 years. And we're taking the opportunity to take the theatre shell, and for a period of just a few years, we're going to, it's a brilliant technology. There's an example of this going on in Paris called L'Atelier des Lumières, and in Tokyo called Team Lab. Intense immersive experience, projection map space, and the first show is a collaboration with David Hockney.
Amazing.
And I shouldn't have announced that, but it's too good not to mention it. We've got a very tempting, extremely famous, very famous popular music.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
I will not say that one.
No, don't say that one. But it's very cool. It's very,
and then
very
we're looking for opportunities to build the bigger theatre that I mentioned to be a sort of a way of responding to the need for city centre bounce back and animation.
Yeah, super, brilliant. Thank you. Now I'm just aware that have we got any questions? I think Simon, were you going to ask?
Yes, I've got some questions here ready for you, Nick. Thank you so far for what's been a fantastic and fascinating insight. So a few questions here. First one being, how do you manage to wear different hats, bringing productions to theatres and property development, i.e. Bridge Theatre and National Theatre?
Yes. Yes. Well, a while ago, I realised that property development, I stumbled upon the thought that property development and theatre production have much in common, except in one main respect, which is the timeline. And I think I would love to have been a property developer. So if my background and probably my ideological beliefs hadn't got in the way. But property development done at a high level with real vision, as for instance, King's Cross, is such an interestingly complex, vision-driven, highly retail. You know, it's got all these moving parts. And it either works or it doesn't work. The great thing about the theatre is if it doesn't work, the show will close. And you can forget about it and move on. There's a problem with talking about it. So I don't know. It's just, I guess the other thing is that most of my job in the theatre really is an enabling job. I don't direct the plays, I don't write the plays. There is something very enjoyably, what would you say? There is something, I don't mean creative in the sense that other people's job aren't creative, but there is something, a particular enjoyment one can get by thinking about how something will work. And I think there is a particularly, we are at a moment where artists and audiences are responding to the idea of three-dimensional spaces that allow different forms of theatre making. And I think that's, I think if there's one fallacy, sorry, long answer here, if there's one potential fallacy that the theatre sector could be falling into, is the idea that we're going to be in a V-shaped recovery. We've been one of the worst sectors of the experience of the economy, and that somehow all we need to do is to get back to where we left off. And it just doesn't feel likely that that will happen. And I think, as they say, never waste a crisis. Surely this is the moment to think about not what people want, but what is in the true heart, what's inherent in the enjoyment in the live social entertainment space. And that feels like people are going to want to live more vividly and more. I think, you know, and I think there's a real opportunity there. And that requires physical space, which requires property, therefore think about it in the round. And it's a very enjoyable thought process.
So one other question here, which I guess is an extension of what you were talking about, but you mentioned at the beginning of the manufacturing process, or that you have a process which you referred to as a manufacturing process. So how do you keep the creativity when dealing with a process?
Process is probably the wrong word in a sense, because I think that the theatre is due with having a little bit more process. I think that one of the things about the theatre is, apart from the craftspeople who make the sets and so on and so on and so on, and that obviously is a manufacturing process, the way in which it's kind of metaphorically manufacturing is in the hands of people with whom one has a fundamentally freelance relationship, i.e. the writers and the directors, apart from rare to have a director on staff like Nick stuff, but you know what I mean, under exclusive contract. So in a way, it's not that one has to struggle with the tension of keeping the creativity going, because they own it. It is it's their work. And one has to kind of have a number of points at which you're giving them very clear indications about whether it's going to reach the stage, whether it's going to head, whether you are actually going to produce it. So that's, I think it's not a tension to try and keep creativity going, because it's the artists and it's their creation.
There's another one here about accessibility to theatre, which I think you've touched on with NT Live, but this question is around, apart from pricing, how do you make theatre accessible to all?
Such a good question. I think pricing is pretty important. I think that I did the second anti-racism training for the small theatre in Hackney Wick that I chair, and I think that learning about the unconscious messages that are sent by the white majority, which are exclusive, which are not intended to be discriminatory or racist or keeping anyone out. I think we're getting much better, we collectively are getting more attuned to the idea that actually, if you represent yourself as being the kind of thing that one section of society will want to come to, and I'm not being pious, I'm just being straightforward, I think, that might be an indication. So for instance, it would be a mistake to be putting out a season announcement which had no black faces, no black or brown faces on it. This is not ticked about the bridge foyer. This is just open straightforwardly onto the outside world in the park. And there aren't any kind of roped off areas for special people who've paid more, whatever. It just feels like, so when it's got 1,070 people from Midsummer Night's Dream, or it's healing, and we've got the acoustics right, so it's not deafening. So it's just trying to send a message. I mean, I think that, you know, we're sending all sorts of unconscious messages. I think that helps, and a kind of plural repertoire. We're building brand at the moment, really, so we're still investing in our relationship with a number of different audiences.
Yep, and it's that inclusion and diversity piece that is something that certainly BKL as well have been working very hard on, and Muv particularly has been involved with. I've got 2 more questions here. I think we've got time for them. The next one is, what's been your proudest achievement?
Well, I'm not very good at those questions, but I'm going to say I do think that 2 things. I think NT Live was a really good idea. It wasn't mine. But I think we executed it really well. So I'm really proud, and that has been a very, very long-term benefit to a major non-profit institution which I love and revere. So I'd say that and I do take enormous pride and pleasure in the geometry and the construction of the Bridge Theatre, which I know is a really nerdy thing to say, but it's a beautiful bit of engineering and incredible value for money. And when we talk about what its depreciation,
we have long conversations about depreciation.
We say in 50 years' time, nothing of that will have degraded.
No, we'll pick it up, we'll move it somewhere else. Absolutely. Yeah.
Either a property developer or an accountant at heart there, Nick, perhaps. But final question for the night then. If arts is your passion, what do you do to relax?
I play the piano.
Oh.
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. We'll have to have a little chat offline about your piano playing. How awesome. What sorts of things do you play?
I play things which are too difficult for me, because then I've got something to work at. So I'm on, well, Beethoven always, of course. Chopin, really, I love Chopin.
That's good. Do you know, I used to have piano lessons when I was younger, and my piano teacher would make me play Chopin and all the stuff, the classical stuff, and then I would go and play musical theatre stuff at home and sing along to it. Yeah, that was my thing. Yeah, there we go.
So
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Mum's too modest. She's a very good singer, so perhaps the 2 of you can get together and record something.
Okay. Is that all the questions, Simon?
That's it. Yes, we're all done here. So I think we've got well, 5 minutes or so to spare, but no more questions from the audience.
Super. Well, do you know what, Nick? It's been such a pleasure. And it's always been a pleasure to work with you and the team at London Theatre Company. So I just want to say thanks for joining us tonight and for giving us your time and for sharing all your stories with us as well.
It's such a pleasure, and it is such a pleasure to work with you and your team. It's been, I told you recently, it's been the best experience I've had. And it's been the most intelligent, value-adding to me process that I've ever, relationship of this nature I've had. So thank you. And thank you for inviting me this evening.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.